Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 119 of the Traveling Professors. Today, Sheri and I are going to take you to the Mayan city of Uxmal. Our trip to Uxmal included two other things. We would go to Uxmal, and then we would go to Kabah, and then we would stop at the Chocolate Museum. So I'm going to break this into three segments, so we don't have a really large one, because this is a big site as well. Now, one of the things about this trip, we waited in front of our hotel right on the money. Nothing. 20 minutes later, nothing. So I get on the phone, send a text, send a second text, and 10 minutes after that, I get a response that they are on the way. And so in the end, we were off an hour late. It didn't affect what we saw. They were just going to make sure that we got what we wanted to do. And our guide told us when he picked us up that what happened was there was supposed to be another couple, and they never showed up. And then finally they said, well, let's just go ahead and pick these people up and let's head on out. So we had the guide and the driver all to ourselves. Well, our trip to Uxmal, using the main map of the Yucatan Peninsula, left Merida and we headed down to where the little dot is, which is Uxmal. And the other sites are right near it. So it's approximately 45 minute to an hour drive. But in that drive, the terrain changes. It becomes a little more rolling with bigger trees. And then if you look at the Mayan city sites, you see, we were at Acanti the last time, and now we're down here at Uxmal, and right next to it is Kabah. And the Chocolate Museum is right in between the two of them on the way back to Merida. Here's a view out the window of the vehicle as we're heading towards Uxmal, and you can see the terrain is different. Certainly has a little bit more rolling. Just on the outside of Uxmal, we stopped at a little village to use the bathroom. So we pulled in, and this is what we saw, a little hut with, looked like tourist trinkets. So assuming this is probably part of the tourist trap piece, we didn't worry too much about it, but when we got in, it was a really cool facility. It's actually the workshop of a well-known Mayan artist, and as a matter of fact, she makes a lot of replicas for various places in the Yucatan, and they're hard to tell the difference between the real things. So anyway, we walked in, they showed us where the bathrooms were, so we went traipsing through the jungle back to the bathroom area. There we have the hand washing region. Went in, did our little thing, then came back and explored a little bit. They had an area where you would have large groups. They did dinners here. They did all sorts of stuff. And it also had an area for dancing. So at the end of the room, we had this big open area for the band. And as we walk back, we see a lot of Mayan stuff in the yard, if you will. And it looked just like the real thing, but it was something that she had made. So it was a replica. And everything in the hut was for sale. It wasn't cheap. It was really well done, but it was pretty reasonable if you're looking for an excellent souvenir of Mayan material that's not made in China. And so here is Sheri talking with the artist, and her husband kind of runs the thing too. And then this is just a general picture of all the stuff that is available. I didn't want to take any individual pictures. That's always a problem for copyright issues and what have you. So it was a really nice stop, and enjoyed that very much. And a couple of days later, we were at a museum in Merida, and it said that these were reproductions, and they were made by her. Now, I found a really good representation of what Uxmal looked like from an aerial standpoint as it would have appeared back in ancient times. So this is what I'm going to use for our map of the site. So we came in, the parking area is back in here, and we purchased our tickets here, and then we will be coming up to the side and back of this temple right here, which is the Temple of the Magician. So here we are standing in line, getting ready to stand in line to get our ticket. Now, when we went to Chichen Itza, that was all included. This time it wasn't. So it's interesting because I'm using a credit card. So I have to stand in one line, pay a 95 peso fee in cash, and then I have to move to the other line to pay the rest of it on my credit card. I think it cost about $20 a person for the two of us to go here. And then we walk out, and you can see there appears to be quite a few people. Actually, a couple of school buses came in and unloaded their students. So you go down and show your ticket, and then you begin the walk towards the site. Now, this is not as big as Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza is more or less sprawled out. This is an important city, but it's very compact. And I would say this is the area we're going to be looking at, is what they've excavated at this point. There are other parts that are not actually on this map that I'm going to be using. Then just before we get ready to go into the site, this is what we are shown. This is a chum. A chum is what they use to collect water. They do not have cenotes here. They do not have rivers in this area. So you have rainwater that is collected in these cisterns that are scattered all over the site to collect the water and then use it during the dry season. So it's quite an interesting device. Of course, cisterns are used by ancient Rome. They were used in Constantinople. Actually, you could go down and tour the cisterns at Constantinople, which is still the emergency water supply for the city. So it's an interesting thing to see.
You're on.
Welcome to Uxmal. I'm Professor Bob of the Traveling Professors, and Sheri's up behind the camera. Tomorrow, she'll be in front of the camera. But we are in Uxmal, and behind me is a magnificent Temple of the Magician. So let's take a view and tour of Uxmal. And the first thing you see as you enter the site is this gigantic pyramid, known as the Temple of the Magician. It's also known as the Pyramid of the Soothsayer. Now, it was interesting. I have a whole library of books on all of these topics, and so every once in a while I do a little check and see what Google comes up with. And Google refers to it as the Temple of the Magician or the Temple of the Dwarf. And I've never heard it called that before. It's also attributed in Google to being built by the Mayan god Uxmal, but that goes against the actual legend. So the actual legend of this is that both names are derived, that is the Pyramid of the Soothsayer and the Pyramid of the Magician. They're derived from an obscure ancient legend about a child that was hatched from an egg by a witch. This child grew to manhood in his first year, and through a series of miraculous contests with the ruler of Uxmal, defeated the ruler and became the lord of the land. Now, one of the miraculous performances of this witch child was to construct this pyramid in one night. Now, Uxmal is usually known as the Lord of Life, and I've never known him to be attributed that. So it's one of those cases where sometimes being on the internet may not be the best thing to have happen. Now, this is a picture of Sheri and I we took after we were finished. So there were all kinds of people around. We finally reached a point where everybody had gotten out of the view and we could take this picture. Now, it's actually 5 temples, but I'll talk about each of the temples when we get to the other side, because what we're going to end up doing is going by it and finishing here. So here we are walking around the side of it. Now, you can't climb this, but there's plenty of climbing to be done. Trust me. So Sheri and I are going to be heading to the governor's palace. So we're right here in the last picture, and we'll be going through this area where we have all of the trees, and there's some various ruins that are in there, buildings, etc., and so on. And then we will come out right about here, and then we'll walk down past this building and then climb up this set of stairs to the main level where the palace of the governor. So here we are, walking beside. You can still see the Temple of the Magician here. There's one of the small ruins, and then we start walking through the area. There is a wall that goes around this place. In some parts it's still in existence. Here's another one of the foundations of a building. Sometimes these are just called building A or building 12 or what have you. But at this edge of building 12, we're looking back. We're heading across. So you see the steps that we're going to have to climb to get up to the governor's palace and some of these smaller buildings over here. So here we are now. We've gone around the corner. You can see the other sections that haven't been quite as cleared. It's important to use the steps that they have marked off because they have something you grab onto. They've got a rope or a chain that you can use to climb up this. It's not as bad as some places, but still the width of the steps are relatively narrow. It's easy going up. Worst case scenario, you just crawl up. It's a lot harder to go down. And then ultimately, here is the view looking back from the top of the platform of the palace of the governor towards the Temple of the Magician. So you see, we've come a lot longer way than it seemed. And then this was looking down at one of the buildings in this little temple complex down here amongst the trees. Now we're going to be going around the palace of the governor. So we've come up the steps. We're going to go this direction because the actual main front of facing is on the other side, right over here. This is actually the back side that you're looking at. And look at the different rooms and buildings. And then there's several objects, including the altar of the cougar that's down here. And then I'll give you a nice little video of that area. And then we'll go around the corner to the Temple of the Turtles. And then we'll be ready to take a good look at one of the great temples. Now, the Palace of the Governor, the building is considered the most extraordinary example of pre-Columbian architecture in the Americas. It raises on a 9-meter high platform platform. It's 187 meters in length and 170 meters wide. Structure measured 98 meters in front and 12 meters in width. It was constructed just after, right at the end of the Classic period, 900 to 1000 AD. And as you'll see, the facade was made using techniques of stone mosaics, large masks of Chak, the rain god, and there's lots of serpents as well. This is all attributed to water, and the land is the center of the throne of the ruler, who is majestically seated outstands. He is surrounded by intertwined serpents and large masks of the god Chak. And what is unusual about Uxmal is this whole city is aligned not with the equinoxes and the solstices. This is aligned with the planet Venus and its various phases. So as we get up to the top, you see the building. You see its platform. The first building was added, that was right there, dead center. That's the first one. There are 11 entrances on this side, and then the two other ends were then added on. So if we get a nice closer look of them here, you see the additional buildings have this corbelled arch, bringing them together. And they're doing some excavation down on the far end, which of course has all of the material that was added on at the end. And you can see from this all of the different masks and things up on the wall. So let's take a little panoramic view of this in a video. Directly in front of the governor's palace, you have this gigantic stone monolith, which has fallen over on its side. Here is a little closer view of it from one side, and then here is the opposite side. Now, if you'll notice in this shot, the little altar directly behind it, that is the platform of the cougar throne. It consists of a small platform, 4.8 meters per side, about 1.2 meters in height, accessed through stairs located on all four sides. It's a bicephalic cougar. It worked as a royal throne. It seems to have been the seat of the royal authority of Uxmal. In its interior, an offering was recovered. It consisted of 913 pieces of beads, jade pectorals, and earrings, vessels, carnelian stones, and polished black stones, arrow tips, flint knives, and obsidians. The cougar has symbolic warlike connotation, and also there's connotations to royal lineage and dynastic power in Mayan imagery. So here is a closer view of it from one of the four sides. Actually, this would be the side that has the palace directly behind me, and since you couldn't get up on top, I just zoomed in as close as I could, and you can see the two cougars. And then standing back behind it, here's a shot of the whole thing. You can see the palace in the background. This is of course directly centered, as is the monolith that's over on one side, so it probably had something to do with, again, Venus. So we left this area and we walked back around. So this is the back side of the governor's palace, and we're going to the House of the Turtles. Now, this is just exactly like, this is what is known as late phase Puch style, 900 to 1000 AD. And the building measures 30 meters long and 10 meters wide. And it has 7 separate enclosures. Simple decoration, smooth walls, cornices. There are sculptures of turtles, which you can see jutting out of the top. These acquire importance due to their association with rain and the earth represented by the turtle shell. In the Mayan language, the word turtle is related to the sound issued by the turtle shell, like a natural drum, like the sound of the storm and thunder. The turtle is the drum of the heavens and also related to the moon. So you can see here on this corner, you can see looking down towards the nunnery, which we'll be heading to eventually, and then looking at the cornices at the top, you see the little turtles along on the edges. And then here's a view down the length of the building. And if you go into where the openings are, here is the view through the building to the other side, and you can see again it's centered on the main nunnery section. So it's quite an interesting little building, but it's easy to miss if you're not careful. And then we left here, and there's another shot of the governor's palace from the back side, and we were intending to head to this next building, which is known as the Great Pyramid. Well, in order to get to the Great Pyramid, you have to go down from the platform that we are on, and I mean to tell you, the steps leading from this spot were approximately 70 75 degrees and much smaller. Now our guide had gone down. There was no hand to hold, but it looked like a disaster waiting to happen. So here's a view of one side of the court in front of the Great Pyramid, and then here's a view of the other side of the court from the Great Pyramid, and that's our guide right down there. And we told him, we said, we don't think we can get down this. And he said, that's not a problem. I'll go over through the trees and meet you on the other side. So what we did was we did this. We ended up going from here back down to the point where we could go down the platform from the governor's palace. The same way we came up, that's how we went down. And then we will simply go straight this direction. We'll go past the ball court and head to these buildings right here, and then come up to the Great Pyramid from the other side. So when we got back to the point where we're ready to go down, there's the view with the telephoto lens of the Great Temple of the Magician. Here's the actual view before we head down. So you have the Temple of the Magician, you have the ball court here and the nunnery, and then this is a little closer view, a little more telephoto view of the same spot. And so at this point we go down the steps. Once down from the platform from the Palace of the Governors, you can see one of the buildings that sits behind the back of the ball court. So we turn left to begin moving towards our guide, and here's the back side of one of the ball court walls, and here's the opposite side of it. You can see they have a ring on it, but it's been put down lower. It would have been higher up, because I don't believe this building's completely done. And then here's a view in the middle. You can see you'd be playing through this whole area, and you can see both scores. And then here's a little closer view of the ball court goal on the other side, and it's pretty obvious they just kind of stuck it in this place. Then we begin going through some of the scrubland, heading back towards the Temple of the Dovecoots. And on our map of Uxmal, we've just come down, we've gone this direction, and now we're heading into this region with multiple quadrangles. In the first one, although it probably had temples on three sides, they have not been put back together. But you do have this circular object with four pillars in the middle, and then you can see off to one side what would be a building. And then we head through that into the second quadrangle, which is just before you get to the Dovecoots temple. Now from this area, you can look over to where the great temple is located. It's actually hidden by this humongous tree. And then in front of it, you have what is called the Temple of the Dovecoots, and that's because the top pieces on this building have these niches in it, which are very typical of what you would find in dovecoots. And so this is one side of it. You see the main entrance that goes back to another temple complex. There are actually three temple complexes behind this. And then here's the view to the next edge of that temple, and then here is the final edge. And then here's a nice little panoramic view of the entire front of that building.
Hola, buenas tardes. Walk a longer distance, but it's plain. It's not necessarily go up there. You can come back around.
Well, we have reached as far south as we're going to visit. There are several temples. Actually, there's one directly behind the Temple of the Dovecoot and several others, but we're not going to have time to see those because remember, we have another city to see and then another museum to see. So you could spend all day here, and it is really nice. There's not a lot of people around, so you can do pretty much what you want to. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn around and go back down this direction and then work our way over to the south entrance of the nunnery right here. So we're going to see the nunnery, and then we'll go and finish up the Temple of the Magician by seeing the opposite side. So as we turn around, you can see these constructions. These would have been buildings. They just haven't reconstructed them at this particular point. They would have had the same look as any of these quadrangles that have buildings. For example, when we go into the nunnery area, this is what you would have seen on the side buildings. And so there's another set of the walls, and now we're going to walk back around the round area with the pillars, and then a little bit further away from the ball court. So there's the ball courts, and then we start getting closer to the nunnery, and you can see the arch that is right here. Now in this case, they have constructed a wheelchair accessible ramp that will allow you to come up and get into this particular quadrangle. It would also then allow you to come back down and then go see the other temples that are on the base side. So we're going up to the south side here, and we're going to have walk down to where the arch is located. As we get closer, you can see the size of the Temple of the Magician looming before us. And before we go through the arch, we have to turn around and take a view back to where we have been. Say there is the palace of the governors, and there is the Great Temple and the ball courts. Sometimes to get a good picture, you just have to buy the postcard. And here's a postcard of Uxmal, and you can see the Temple of the Magician, and you can see the quadrangle there, which of course is known as the nunnery. And we're going to come in the side right here where the arch is located. But then you see the ball court, the Temple of the Turtles, the Great Pyramid, and the Governor's Palace. So it looks like it's nice and compact, but when you get in there, it's a little bit different. Now, when we enter, now we're coming in from this is the coming in the south side. We're going to come through the main arch. Now, these arches in Mayan cities, sometimes they're called false arches or Mayan arch, is a representation of the Puch style of construction. It was used to mark a formal, important access to enclosures, like the one that is found that we're going through, the south limit of the Uxmal section of the nunnery, and was used to signal and to restrict entries to the main groups, such as the quadrangle of the birds, the nuns, pigeon house, etc., and so on. Another important aspect is that the vault is built considering the array of pre-manufactured pieces that are all placed on top of one another, and the lid slab closes the vault and marks the sky of the interior space. And so that's what we're seeing here as we're walking through the south section of the nunnery with our guide standing there getting ready to help us. Now here we are. This is a panoramic view, a video of the interior of the quadrangle of the nunnery.
It's a non-quadrangle, the nunnery. All the faces of the break dance are decorated at the northern facade. The south will be via houses, and the eastern will be snakes, snake heads ascending to heaven are forming upside down pyramids, and right in the middle will be an stylized owl as a symbol of night, as a symbol of darkness.
Now, of course, the nunnery is a term that the Spanish gave the site because it's what it looked like from buildings that they were familiar with. But we're coming in the south, and we're going to walk out to the center where there's a little slab. Actually, it's part of the cistern in that area. But the south building that we came in and the north building on the other side, which is the main building, they're 90 yards long. And anywhere you see a little gap, there is a room there. But those rooms do not interconnect. So once we get out to the middle, we look off to what is known as the west building. And the west building is 59 yards long. It's actually 7 yards longer than the opposite number. You have 7 rooms. Each has a door or central portico, and they have masks on the top. And then we turn to the front and we begin to see what is known as the north building. Now the north building is the same size. It's 90 yards long, and this one has 2 temples set into the steps. The first one, which is on the left-hand side and is the larger of the 2, is supported by 4 square columns. And this is called the Venus Temple because the early explorers found a frieze on the interior walls referring to the planet Venus. The smaller temple on the other side only has 2 columns, and it is unnamed because they haven't found any kind of frieze on the inside of it. Now when you would turn and go towards the center of the building, you see this gigantic stele. It's a Mayan date stone. They haven't been able to read it at this point, so it is actually put right into the main staircase in the middle of the north building. And then looking at the other small temple, you see the small temple there with just the 2 columns. And then you get a kind of a view of the whole of this particular north building. But this is what it would have looked like in ancient times. Painted stucco. It is just stunning. Absolutely magnificent. And then looking to the east building, you'll see this one only has 5 doorways, 5 entrances. And again, they don't connect. So you get closer to the edge, and you can see in this picture the chalk symbols on the corner of the building. And when you come around that building, now you get a shot of the Temple of the Magician. But before we head down into the quadrangle of the birds, let's look up and look at those masks on the side of that east building with the beautiful sky. Well, here we are in the Mayan arch as we're heading into what is known as the quadrangle of the birds, even though what you see through here is the Temple of the Magician. Well, one of the reasons that the Temple of the Magician comes in here is in the quadrangle. It's believed that the buildings that were associated with that quadrangle were then built over, and as a matter of fact, they refer to that area as Temple 1, which is the oldest temple on this part of the ground, was filled in the form of the base for the much larger pyramid that came later on, and apparently is one of 4 small buildings built around a square patio. And the decoration consisted of Chak the rain god masks with small drums and bas reliefs. It also, over the main doorway, had a famous carving known as the Queen of Uxmal that is now in the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico, and it depicts a priestess coming out of the mouth of a serpent, which is typical of what you found at Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City. So anyway, here is a video showing the quadrangle of the birds.
And the architecture there is named Chen style. Chen style means water well style. Chen, like chi chen, means water well. Chen means water well. That's the style of water well. The decoration is from the bottom, decorated from the bottom to the very bottom. In the book style, all your and the Rio Black is the one you saw like window. That's the third style. From the third city, each city has their own style. That's Chen, that's Fuke style, and Rio Black style. To decorate, to ornate the building. Basically, looks like a tiny.
Oh, here we are, directly in front of the Temple of Uxmal. I've talked about Temple number 1, which would be down here at the base. Temple number 2 sits up a little bit higher. It's about a third of the way up towards where the opening appears at this particular point. Then temple number 3 is just beneath the opening, and it would have had a throne on the inside of it. Temple number 4 is just between the opening and the top of the temple. And then the final temple, which is Temple 5, is the upper one, which of course crowns the most recent building on the site. It's 150 steep steps flank the temple on either side, and that is representing the rain god. And this is what it would have looked like when it was finished. And it's not uncommon for temples to be built over the top of, you don't have to start making a new temple from the ground up. Now, as we get ready to leave, here's the one of the buildings that's in the quadrangle of the birds. This is the one that allows you to exit the site, and you notice that it has openings because it's a portico with columns. So this is looking to one end, this is looking to the other end, which is where we're going to exit, and then this is a view out into the courtyard of the quadrangle. And then here is a little aerial art view of the quadrangle of the birds with the Temple of the Magician set into it. And then as we walked by one of the buildings, there's some of the heads that were jutting out of the architecture. And now we're simply walking around the building to exit the site. So that's the view up to the Temple of the Magician. And there's the view out into the area where the ball court is, heading off to the other buildings. And then here we're turning the corner, heading back to the parking lot.
Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.